Okay, now let's talk about the third component, which is demand. And again, I encourage you to add your questions into the chat. So when we get there, we're addressing those. Okay, let's talk about how to double your demand. So by your demand, I mean how many leads you have, what your pipeline looks like. So that when you have more demand than supply, then just simple economics, you're able to charge more for the type of work and value that you're delivering to your clients. You're able to be more selective about the type of work that you're doing and how you're delivering that work, working 4 days a week or 3 days a week, however 10 months out of the year, however you want to set up your specific schedule as an independent consultant. Think about this component when you think about doubling your revenue, which is doubling your demands. And I'll talk about some of the blockers here in a moment, which are important. But before we get to that, let's talk about what that might look like. This is the chart that I like to show here, which is about the independent consultants, what I call the independent consultants maturity curve. The book goes into a lot more detail about this, but at a high level, when you're thinking about doubling your demand, if you're here, let's say that you want to identify where you're at on this curve. For a lot of us, we're in this dependent mode. Dependent, it might sound really bad. And I think I was there for 4 years or so in my own business. It's not a bad place to be. You're out here running your own business, which takes so much courage, but there's so much more opportunity as you move up the curve. So don't judge yourself for wherever you're at on the curve, is my point. Let's just figure out where you are on the curve and then be able to create a strategy attached to that. So let's start with the basics. Dependent. That means that most of your work comes from people who know you. They may refer you, or just general word of mouth. That's where your work primarily comes from, or it might come from recruiters or agencies or marketplaces where you're waiting for kind of something to happen in order for you to react to it. And you take what you can get. And you might be in the mindset of not wanting to leave money on the table, like we were talking about in that first step, where we don't want to turn away work even though it's not ideal, because we're worried about, is there anything else coming? That's generally what a dependent type of a cycle looks like for a consulting business. Like I said, I was there for a really long time. I would just wait for people in my network to call me when they knew they needed my help. And it was really simple. And in a lot of ways, it fit really well for my lifestyle at that time, with really young kids and just working with people who knew me. And there was kind of a lot of shortcuts as a result. But when you get to the place where you're ready to start doubling your business and start making more money and working less time, you want to start moving up this maturity curve. Maturity curve is what I call the creating stage. This is where you might be more pounding the pavement, doing more outbound type of work, of lead generation work, for example, whether it's posting on LinkedIn or networking, or getting introductions to people that you think might be your ideal clients. You're making yourself known to those people. You might be offering a wider menu of services, just kind of not wanting to leave any stone unturned, and having the beginnings of pipeline control because you're having more of a proactive approach to your pipeline. Then from there, we move up to the known for stage. This is where you start creating more inbound opportunities, but it's not really because it's people from your network. It's because you've started building a reputation. And this is where you have a clearer specialization. It's clearer about the problems you solve. You may be doing speaking and writing to build that reputation, and you are creating demand as a result of it. And then finally, you go to the place where you're sought after, where that reputation, you've got that really solid reputation. You've got more demand than supply. You may be moving into more advisory type retainers and work that requires very little time to create the value, and doing things like more speaking and writing and authoring. That's what this maturity curve looks like for independent consultants. And so to double your demand, you want to know where you're at right now on this maturity curve, and then think about what will it take to get to this next step. What are the strategies you want to start testing out? What are the routines you want to start building into your into your week, both from a, juggling client work with running your business? How do you want to start thinking differently about yourself and your clients and what you offer and the value and your inventory, those first two steps that we talked about, in order to move from where you're at now, whether it's dependent to creating or creating to known for or known for to sought after, so that then when you move from one of these spots to the next, that's what creates the doubling in demand. Let's talk about, though, the obstacles to doubling this demand. And that is, number one, inconsistency. We have this so often where we get really sucked down into our client work, and we have well intention to work on our business, but week after week goes by and we don't. And then we create a gap in our pipeline, or we end up taking on work that's less valuable to us and potentially to our clients because we weren't focused on that business building, those business growth um, habits. Might also be fear. This happens so often where we're worried we're creating too much demand, and then we won't be able to support all of it. A tool that I like to teach my clients, and there's a podcast episode about this. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but you can find it on my podcast, of creating an excess demand protocol. What are you going to do instead of trying to manipulate your business in a way that creates just the amount of demand you need? That's so hard. That's so hard to do. There are so many variables. How long it takes a client to make a decision, whether a client decides to move forward or not, how much time, capacity they're going to need in order for you to deliver the result. There are so many variables for you to basically have a process where that all comes together perfectly all the time to meet your revenue goals is almost impossible. Instead, what you want to do is figure out, how do you create more demand than you can handle? And then what are you going to do with that demand? It might be that you increase your pricing. It might be that you bring in some subcontractors, either client facing or not. It might be that you have a referral pipeline where you're you're handing off work to other consultants and taking a referral fee for that. Knowing how you're going to handle that excess demand instead of trying to throttle it to match your availability is one of the recipes for you to get to the place where you've doubled your demand, doubled your revenue. Self-doubt, this often comes into play. You're so good at what you do as a consultant, and oftentimes it's so common to feel that you're not that great at business development, at marketing and selling yourself. And so getting over that blocker is really important to get to the place where you can double that demand. And then the last blocker that you want to watch out for and manage proactively is feeling that the demand is out of your control, that somehow the market conditions put a constraint on what you're able to accomplish, that somehow the market conditions end up creating the pipeline that you've got or that you don't have, or that the market conditions are creating some kind of the nature of work that's coming to you or not. And again, I want to remind you that you're in a business of one. You are not looking for thousands of clients. You're likely looking for tens of clients, maybe even one or two clients. You're not looking for a billion, hundreds of thousands of clients here. Those are available to you. And it goes back to you being your own constraint and not letting the market or those thoughts about the external things being a constraint.